on the issue of DACA and immigration?
Looking for something that President Trump supports, and he's not yet indicated what measure he's willing to sign. As soon as we figure out what he is for, then I would be convinced that we were not just spinning our wheels.
Chuck Schumer used Jell-O. That's another way of saying Jell-O.
Well, as one of my colleagues said, it seems a lot of senators probably know a lot about Jell-O. But the reality is that where we've been in this process is that the president put forward his proposal over about 11 months ago, sending it to Congress. General Kelly went to Congress to say, here's how we need to solve DACA. The DACA situation has been unresolved for decades, which is why Obama took actions in his own hands with an unconstitutional solution to the problem. We asked Congress to fix it. We sent our priorities in October, a long list. We then sent a refined list a few weeks ago. We have been absolutely consistent, Chuck, in what it is that we're asking for these. There's 4 criteria. One is the DACA population, one is border security, ending chain migration, ending the visa lottery program. I might be a naive optimist on this, but I actually think we're making significant progress and we will get a deal. And when we get a deal, I think that there are champions like Senator Durbin who will be hailed as a hero for helping make this happen. But here's where we are. The border issue, Democrats are moving forward. They are saying, yes, we recognize the necessary.
They're giving you the wall.
They're moving forward.
Right? They gave you the full funding. $18 billion is what Chuck Schumer agreed to in that Friday meeting.
There's a couple of things that need to be clarified on that, because sometimes what Democrats have done is say they'll authorize it without appropriating it, which is a game here. Democrats have voted before to authorize lots of money that never happened. So we need to clarify that. But we see progress. On our side, they said they want the 690,000 DACA population expanded. Senator Durbin has made the case that say many people did not register and they should not be held harmful. We've been willing to expand that population. So there's progress happening here, which again leads us to Chuck, to then why are we shutting down the government?
Well, I guess then the Graham Durbin say that they put this offer out here. Now you've got Chuck Schumer saying, so why not say, okay, it seems like we have the parameters for a deal. Democrats are willing. You guys are arguing over whether you're going to appropriate it or not. But it seems as if what they thought, Chuck Schumer says what he thought he had an agreement of, that the president changed his mind a few hours later. I guess the question I have for you is, who's in charge of the president's position on immigration? Because what look at Lindsey Graham. There was he calls them Tuesday Trump versus Thursday Trump. What's the difference here?
President Trump has been crystal clear on what he wants, and he has not wavered in that, Chuck. What Lindsey Graham and Senator Durbin offered to the president was to say, here, we've narrowed it down to these 4 areas you've asked us to. When they came over to the White House and presented them, we found them to be woefully insufficient inside those 4 areas. But nonetheless, we had narrowed down the broader debate into a smaller one. We feel like we are making progress on the overall discussion. We think we will get to a solution. What befuddles us is to say we're going to not pay millions of our troops serving around the world, and we're not going to pay our border agents until what? We don't know what it is they're asking for. They've said, give us a shorter CR. Tonight, the Senate Republicans are going to vote instead of a 4-week CR and a 3-week CR, and yet Democrats are still unwilling to give us their vote to keep the government open.
One of the issues Democrats seem to have is they just don't believe that the oral promise they get from the president will be fulfilled, because every time they think they have one, somebody with a stiffer spine on the immigration issue gets to the president. What do you say to that?
I don't think there's anybody with a stiffer spine than the president. I think I'll give you a different theory on it, which is that when you look back over the last year and you see record tax relief, you see Supreme Court justice confirmed, you see more justices confirmed at circuit court level than any year in American history, repeal